So, inshallah, in today's class, we're going to be covering chapter number 4 questions. So, chapter number 4 is all about software. When I say the word software, I basically mean that we will be discussing content related to, you can say, how does your computer behave upon your hardware. So, in simple words, you can say, like, what are the softwares that your computer use? What type of softwares are existing out there? What are programming languages? What are translators? What is IDE? What are the possible benefits you can obtain by using a specific IDE? What are the different sort of applications that a user can use? What are some sort of, like, you can say, beneficial softwares which users can use, and what are some sort of software which the computer on its own may require for beneficial purposes? So, like, maybe to increase the performance of the computer or so on. See, so in essence, said, why does CS have separate chapters for hardware and software? Good question. Because in hardware, you're basically studying what type of things are existing within your computer that allows your computer to work or function. Whereas software basically teaches you what type of things are used within, or like are used or stored within those hardware devices, which basically make use of those hardware component to conduct a specific function. So in simple words, hardware teaches you that maybe your computer has a hard disk stored in it, whereas software teaches you that there can be an antivirus installed on your hard drive, which can basically ensure that no virus enters your computer. So this is like a general difference between hardware and software. Say, so we will be starting off with the summer 2025 ka paper as always. So let me just open it up and I'm going to screen share. I hope that we get a question for chapter number 4 out there. If not, तो फिर हम आगे ही जाएंगे. But before moving on, can you guys see the screen clearly? And also, is my audio clearly audible? Yes or no? Yeah, perfect. All right, so you see that this isn't okay. Yeah. So we got the question right up here. The question number 3. This is related to IDE. So in today's class, we won't be specifying it to some subtopic. We're just going to do as many questions as we can. We're going to be covering the whole chapter number 4. So if I miss on any question, just let me know. So in the first part, the question states that a programmer writes a program to store and sort all the data for the books in her home library. Okay. The programmer uses a high-level language to write the program. So you have two types of languages. You have one known as high-level language, and the other is known as low-level language. High-level is the one which is basically easier to understand and something which usually programmers use. So like you can say Python, Java, all of these are like high-level languages. Low-level languages, on the other hand, are the languages which basically are used to directly communicate with the computer. So you can say assembly, maybe directly coding in binary, even though that's something not done today. We have assembly or sort of those languages, but those languages are basically known as low-level language. But because they are something which allows you to have a direct discussion with the CPU or the computer, it is way more difficult than a high-level language. Say, and if you start learning programming language, you're going to understand that a lot of high-level languages also make use of keywords which are pretty similar to English. So like if I'm writing coding Python, so I can just like print maybe you can say for like, or I can have the symbol of equals to, or maybe I can say print हो सकता है, और क्या हो सकता है, true false. So like you set a boolean variable and you set it as true or false. So it's like pretty much similar to your normal day English. So it's easier to understand that too. So now the first question up here says that one reason for writing the program using a high level language is that it is easier to read and write. And now it asks you to write two other reasons why the programmer might want to go with a high level language. So the thing is, मुझे एक बात बताओ, if there is something which can be easily understood, this does mean easier to debug, easier to draft new code. Okay, 1 point valid, easier to debug. And the second one, easier to draft new code, maybe, but there are better options than that. Now, coming to the first point stated by Rayan, easier to debug. Why is it easier to debug? The word debug basically means to find errors, to solve errors within your code. Ab hota ye, you tell me if there is a specific sort of code existing out there, which basically maybe difficult, but at the same time you're writing it in like a high level language. This means, which is, so we know that high level language is easier to understand because it is similar to your normal English day-to-day English It's going to be including those day-to-day keywords from your English language, right? So if there is something which is easier to understand, this means that I can easily, walaikum assalam, walaikum assalam, this means that we can easily find errors in it. And that's the reason why we basically state that one reason why the programmer may want to go with the high-level languages, that it is easier to debug. So हम एक तो ये लिख लेंगे, easier to debug. And then the second point is, you tell me one thing, if there is a language, like maybe I say that I find English to be easier than in comparison to Urdu. So if I have to write maybe a long paragraph on something, would it be easier for me to write it in English or in Urdu? If I find English to be easier, this means I can write more in English, right? So the same point applies up here too, because high level language is something which is easier to implement. We can also say that the one other reason why a programmer might want to go with a high level language is that it is like more easier for him, and the chances of making an error while writing it is less. So you can say less likely to make errors, less likely to make errors. And these 2 points, while they might seem similar, they are counted differently. One is about finding errors and the other one is about making errors. So one is like maybe you might have made mistake, but figuring out an error in a code like this, so it might say like print, and print के बाद आप let's see ये कर दो, hello world quotation mark. Now, do you know what's the error up here? I missed the quotation mark up here, right? So I did not add a quotation mark, due to which there is an error. But what if I tell you that I have to write the same thing in binary? So I might be like 0 1 0 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 0 1 1. How can you figure out among all these numbers that the error exists maybe in this element? So because of this one other reason, we also say that now it's very much easier that when you make use of high level language, the chances of making errors are lower. Sir, hexadecimal के लिए भी same है. Hexadecimal, no, hexadecimal has its own pros and cons, which have been discussed in chapter number 1 की recordings. आप वहां से check कर लो. So these points are basically explicitly stated for high level language. So I would recommend कि आप ये high level language के लिए ही use करें. But अब जैसे hexadecimal वगैरह हो गए, उनके अपने benefits है, so it's recommended that you write those benefits in its own place. Yeah. Hexadecimal वाले एक का ये है कि that it is easier to debug, though not debug. Hexadecimal के अपने थे, वो मैं आपको बाद में बता देता हूँ. सही, I can share the screenshot, तो आप उसमें सारे देख लो. लेकिन you have specific benefits, and उसके अंदर यही है कि it is easier to maybe easier to write it on the screen rather than like listing down all those long numbers, and then there are also other stuff points which you can memorize and then write up. But now these points are explicitly only for a high level language, so it's better to only write them in a high level language question. Coming to part B of the same question, the programmer uses an IDE. And what is an IDE? So if you are writing code, if any one of you is writing code in or learning Python in school, you might have used the thing software known as PyCharm. So PyCharm is an IDE, or in simple words, if you haven't used it, an IDE is basically a software which basically allows you to write code on it and run it. So your Visual Studio, your PyCharm, Xcode on MacBook, and all those softwares which allow you to code and then also run it is basically known as an IDE. So now it says that one function of the IDE is to provide a translator. What's a translator? It is basically that function or that part of your IDE which converts your plain programming code into an executable file which you can run. सही है? So अब ऐसे थोड़ी होते that you try to play, let's say, RDR2, Red Dead Redemption 2, and you open up the code and you run it, right? You have an executable file. That executable file is produced when you pass the code through a translator. So now it's saying that you need to complete the statements about translators. What are those statements? The first one is that some of them are, अच्छा, इन्होंने clearly बता दिया that there are a few terms which might not be used, so you should only use a term once. So a compiler translates the dash into dash. So सबसे पहले remember, a compiler translates the dash at once before dash. सबसे पहले, what do you think will a compiler translate? The actual code, right? So we're going to be looking for some actual code points. So the whole code. So a compiler translates the whole code. Before what? Before basically executing it. So like you first have the code, you then translate it, and once you translate it, then you execute it. This is the process. So it's not like you're going to be, you need to ensure that first your translation part is complete. It can't be that you first write the code and you immediately go and execute it. That's not possible. So you're going to be writing it at once before you're executing. Yes, before executing. Then a compiler produces an error report that displays dash errors. So remember, your compiler has this one feature that it displays all the errors at once, whereas you have one other thing which we are calling as interpreter. Interpreter basically executes the code line by line, and then when it finds an error, it basically stops and it displays that specific error and then carries on. So we're going to be writing it that an interpreter translates and executes the code line by line. So we have line by line, line by line. An interpreter stop execution when a dash is found. So just I told you, the moment an error is located, it's going to stop. And then it continue once it is corrected. Now you might be wondering, how do I know this line by line thing beforehand? So once you start practicing, you're going to know that these are some keywords. So you should be aware of the keywords like line by line, because this is what the examiner is basically focusing upon. So now if somebody writes up here that it's going to be going and it's going to read it word by word, or maybe stuff like rather than writing line by line, you go like statement by statement. So it's advised that you should write something which the examiner expects to mention within the marking scheme. So even though you might be awarded, I'm not saying you might not be awarded, but why do you want to put yourself at risk? Say, so for that reason, yeah, sure. So basically you have two types of compiling devices. A compiler is basically sorry, you have two types of translating devices. One is known as compiler, or you can say translating device, translator software. One is basically known as compiler and the other is interpreter. So a compiler is basically that software which takes your whole code all the way from line number 1 till maybe line number 100. It executes, it translates all of the code into binary language, and then it starts executing it. And at the end, if it does not work, so it's going to give you a report that you like the following errors have been located at point number this, and so on. Interpreter, on the other hand, is basically that software which basically takes one line of the code. So like maybe line number 1 says print hello world, and then it's going to run that line first, and then it's going to execute that, then it's going to go to line number 2. So if let's say for instance line number 1 has an error, it's going to stop at that moment. It's going to give you the error that line number 1 has this error, and until or unless you don't solve that error, you cannot proceed to the next line. So your Python basically makes use of an interpreter. So if your line number 2 is incorrect and maybe line number 10 is correct, it's not going to proceed unless you solve the error in your line number 2. Now is it clear? That's a small difference between your interpreter and compiler. If you have any other questions, you can ask off. Perfect, perfect. So continuing with the same part, now it says that give two other functions commonly found in an IDE. So your IDE has multiple functions. Now you can talk about any of them. Say you have like maybe you have a code editor, you have a runtime environment, you might have those features of error diagnostic that it tells you where an error is. Then you might have also, if you're sort of correct function, okay, correct function. Now you might write the word color functions, but you're going to lose marks. Why? Because that is known as pretty print. So pretty print, or maybe sometimes if you write a specific letter, it also provides you an auto correction, and also not auto correction, auto completion feature. And also if you are making some error, it also tells you auto correction on it. It highlights it and then suggests you that maybe you missed this part. So all of these are like functions. You just need to write two of them and then explain them. So maybe I want to go with one can be like auto completion, or I can say maybe code editor ka lo sabse aasan ye, say code editor. Code editor is basically the place where you write the whole code. So what does a code editor do? It basically provides the programmer with the opportunity to write or change the program. So we can say allows the programmer to write or change a code. Allows the programmer to write and change the code. Yeah, program kar do and change the code, yeah, program, whatever suits you, right? And then function number 2 can be like, let's say pretty print kar lete, because Rayan stated that the one which is a colored function. So we're going to write pretty print. Now what is pretty print? Pretty print is that if you sometimes go and write code, you're going to see that all of the features have like, so like a variable might be colored in blue. So like if I say name, that might be blue, but then after name, maybe this is black. But if you store an integer, it's going to be like in yellow color. But then what if I say that there is a Boolean variable, which is, because it's again a variable, it's going to be in blue color, but the identity or the value within that, which would be either true or false, it's maybe like in red color. So what is this? These different colors are basically indicating the nature of the value stored or whatever it is up there. So it helps you, because sometimes people are like, no, that's not possible. That's not possible. So it basically helps you when you have a long code and you cannot figure out what that specific variable or thing is storing. So you can just look at the color and you're going to see, oh, okay, okay. All blue colors are representing a variable. This means that this specific whatever object it is also a variable because it has the same color, right? So pretty print is that feature, and it basically means that the command words or the identifiers are given different colors. So the command words, the command words or the identifiers are given different color, given different color, and you get a perfect 4 on 4 for this. Now continuing, it says that a programmer wants to print a list of all her books onto a paper. Identify suitable type of printer. Okay, now this goes back to chapter number 3 and chapter number 2, so we are going to be skipping this part. And again chapter number 2, so no, skip. This is chapter number 3, so again skip. Never mind. So we are done with this one question related to your chapter number 4. समझ गए? Sir, लेकिन code editor थोड़ा vague नहीं होगा? No. Code editor is the exact word which your examiner expects. So now if I open up the marking scheme for this paper, you're going to see that the marking scheme will also be stating the same code editor word. Perhaps the whole box, the actual box which is being there in your IDE. So if you open up an IDE, this section where you basically write the code, this has the official name as code editor. See? So this section is basically known as code editor. तो इसलिए इसको ये हम vague नहीं बोलेंगे. समझ गए? So like even if you open up the marking scheme for May June 2025, you're gonna see that it has the same name. Now we are done with this question. Now let's look into summer 13. Do you have any questions related to this, or should we continue? Wow, hello, Aten. All right, so we're going to continue and let's hope, okay, we did get the first question as the one which we wanted. So, ek to yahan pe aa gaya ki, okay, a student records himself singing a song for his music project and this is being converted. Okay. So the first part is basically about chapter number 3. You just need to explicitly mention whether what sort of input device can it be. So let's solve it. It can be like a microphone maybe. So microphone. And then the second part says that the student uses sound editing software to edit the recorded sound. Okay. And now you need to tell whether this is an application software, security system, or utility software. So you should be aware of the different sort of softwares your computer includes. So what comes under security software? So this is chapter number 4, software. So maybe what is application software? Application software usually includes all this stuff which we usually make use of, like maybe editing software, stuff like that. Your security software includes stuff related to maybe antivirus, firewall, and stuff like that. System software is stuff which basically your whole organization, your what do we call operating system, OS or Windows or Mac, whatever it is basically making use of. So like I can say this fragmenter is a secure system software. No. And then utility software is again something which can again come as a specific sort of software that is being used to provide some sort of utility. So you can say like antivirus, जो कि हमने security के under भी किया था, that can also come under utility software too. So the answer to this part is basically application software. You guys are correct. Why? Because it is basically making use of a specific scenario. We personally installed this software and it is for a specific application. So the answer to this is A. Now this is chapter number 1. We're going to skip this and I hope we find another question. Otherwise, we're going to be continuing to some other paper. No. Okay. Yep. Question number 4. So question number 4 states that a computer has an operating system. Okay, that makes sense. And then it says one function of the operating system is to handle interrupts. Describe the role of operating system in handling interrupts. Now, what's an interrupt? Interrupt basically is a signal. It's a signal. And what is this signal about? So it's basically, you can say that what if I tell you that I am playing a game. Okay, so I'm playing a game and you're playing it on laptop. And let's say your charging is now less than 5%. So you might have seen that a pop-up comes up on your screen, your battery is low. Now tell me one thing. How does the computer stop the game and give the priority to a pop-up? It basically makes use of an interrupt. So an interrupt is sort of a signal which basically tells the users that, okay, tell not the user, to the computer, that I need immediate attention. I need to tell the user some specific thing which is very, very important. Yes, Atel, yes. What? Yes, Atal, do you have a question? Okay, I can explain that at the end of the class. Okay, I can explain that at the end of the class. So now what is an interrupt? So yeah, for instance, if there is some specific thing which requires immediate attention. So now this pop-up, which is to like plug in your charger, this is something which requires a lot of attention. Why? Because if you don't, maybe the computer might drain out of the battery and it might turn off. So what interrupt does is that it tells the computer that if there is something of high priority, it should stop whatever it is doing right now and should give priority to the thing which is immediately required. And then it is going to give the priority to that specific function or task or whatever it is. So like in this case, it will be this pop-up, and once the pop-up comes up, it's going to come onto the screen, and once you complete it, it's going to go off, and the previous task which was earlier being executed, so like I was playing game, that is going to come up to whatever we call it onto the screen, so the user can continue with whatever he was trying to do. See, so Junaid and Atil, if you don't focus on the class, I would have to remove you. And this is the last warning. I won't be stating it again. And this is, I'm serious, by the way. Now we have to talk about the role. So what is the role of the operating system? So firstly, the role is that it assigns a priority to an interrupt. Say, so it assigns a priority to an interrupt. So like if there is a specific function or a task which requires an immediate attention, so like maybe the battery is running low, okay, so your operating system has to see whether this is something which requires immediate attention, yes or no. If it is yes, then it is going to assign it a higher priority. If no, then it is going to assign it a lower priority, which means that once you are done with playing game, then it's going to come up and it will be asking you that, bro, there is this one task, do you want to execute it, yes or no? Say, and then the second part is that once you have assigned the priority, the basic software which is used to handle an interrupt, or like maybe bring up the interrupt onto the CPU to execute it and does the whole task, that is basically an interrupt service routine, or you can say interrupt handler. So we can say that it uses an interrupt handler. And you can also state that it makes use of interrupt service routine. So both are correct. Okay, service routine. But the second point is the one which usually examiner service routine pointer likhne wala tha, my bad. So service routine. So usually examiner does give this one question: define what is interrupt service routine. So you should be aware of that. See, and then also because yes, Rayan, are interrupts error? No, they are not error. They are basically signals, and those signals are like, what if I tell you that your battery is running low, okay, and you're playing game? Who is going to tell you that there is an immediate requirement of like maybe plugging in a charger into your laptop? You should be getting that pop-up, right? Because if you're in your game, you might not be aware that your battery is draining. So interrupt is basically that kind of signal which tells your CPU that we have to execute this one task, which is basically to give the user a pop-up that maybe plug in battery, plug in charger. So we need immediate attention. So it's basically the interrupt part, which basically has this capability of taking over whatever that was being done earlier on, and so that it tells the user to do something. So any task which requires immediate attention is basically known as interrupt, which is a signal. Say it's not an error. So दो point तो आपकी हो गए. The third point is going to be like, okay, your operating system also manages the interrupt queue. So what if at one moment there are like two things which requires the user's attention? So two interrupts. So it's going to make sure that one of them is executed at once, and which one of the two is executed. It's your operating system. So operating system is going to look at the priority. The one requiring more priority will be what do we call it, executed first, not memory management. No. Interrupt does not have to do anything with memory management. That's a total different thing. Okay, and just like that, error detection also has nothing to do with interrupts. We are just basically in this question talking about what does an operating system do for interrupting, for handling interrupts. So if the question was, yes, exactly, Saifullah. If the question was describe the roles of operating system, yes, then you're correct that memory management would be a right point to it. So the third point up here will be that it manages the interrupt queue. Interrupt queue. And you get 2 by 2. Now, up here I wrote 3 points. So you just had to write like two of them to get a perfect 2. Otherwise, I wrote 3 because it did not specify. So if either of the points is vague, I'm still going to get 2. Then it says give to other functions of an operating system. Now you can write any of those points which you guys were mentioning earlier. So like Saifullah said, memory management. That's a valid one. So memory management. And then maybe you want to state any other function. You have like multiple functions. You can talk about managing files. You can say it provides an interface. You can say it manages the like multitasking. It provides a platform for running application. It provides system security. It manages user accounts. So whatever you want to go with. So maybe I might like go with manages user accounts. You should memorize like at least, perhaps you should know all of them, because the question can directly come up and ask you explain memory management. So you should be aware of what memory management is, right? So the part C says that hardware and software interrupts are two types of interrupts. Give an example of a hardware interrupt. So a hardware interrupt is going to be something which maybe, which might not, which basically will make sure that a hardware device is being used. So maybe what if I say that I click a button on my mouse, like the cross button at the top screen. So like if this is my browser and then I have this cross button and I click on it, it's going to turn off this whatever software I was running up. So this is sort of an signal to the computer that I want to do this and this requires immediate attention. So you can say button click on mouse. Button click on mouse. And then the second part says that give one example of a software interrupt. So a software interrupt can be when an error occurs. Say, so if there is maybe some error that occurred, like for instance, I'm writing a code and in that code, somewhere I write something like 2 divided by 0. So 2 divided by 0 is basically infinite. So it basically leads to an infinite error that your computer goes into an infinite loop or something like that, which is a big error. So we can say one software sort of interrupt can be division by 0. You should memorize this. Say ye aapko yaad honi chahiye, division by 0. Just like that, you can also state one other point, like what if 2 processes are trying to access the same memory location? That can also be a software interrupt. Can a notification or pop-up be an interrupt? Yes, a notification or a pop-up both are interrupts. So like if a pop-up comes on your screen that you need to charge your device, or maybe there is this virus coming up, both of them are interrupts, because they are telling you that you as user need to look into this. This is something very serious. So if there is something which seriously requires your attention immediately, understand that is basically an interrupt. So we are done with this question, and now we need to see, no, this is not. So we are also done with this part. Now, are there any questions regarding this question, or should we go on to discussing the paper number 11? All right, seeing none, so we're going to continue to paper number 11. I hope we find a question regarding paper 11, regarding chapter 4 up here too. So nope, not this. No. 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 Okay. No. 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 Okay. So apparently we do have question number 9. No, don't worry. Even if it's IGCSE or if it's O level, it's the exact same. So like even if I open up the O level paper, so let me open it up for you, so you guys don't have this one, you can say, problem or whatever wonder you guys have that the papers are different. It's 100% same. There is no difference between either of the papers. So yes, so you see this is June 2025 paper 11. No, marking is also same. Like even the marking scheme is the same. Everything is same. There is no difference at all. So this is from this one website, Cambridge. And if you see, if I focus on question number 9, it's 100% the same which I had for IGCSE. See, so your paper is also similar. You don't need to worry about either of them. नहीं पेपर भी सेम है, पेपर इज सेम, मार्किंग भी सेम, सब कुछ सेम है. फॉर कंप्यूटर साइंस, अगेन दिस इज ओनली फॉर कंप्यूटर साइंस एंड अ फ्यू अदर सब्जेक्ट्स. So like not for every subject. Now a lot of subjects have differences, but usually for computer science it's 100% same. तो इसलिए so now we're going to be focusing on this one question which is related to memory management. अब उसके अंदर वो हमें बोल रहे हैं कि okay, there is each employee in a finance company has a computer, okay, makes sense, and an electronic account, okay, and then each computer has an operating system, and the one function of the system is to manage memory. And now we need to basically talk about what does managing memory means for an operating system. So इसके अंदर आपने बताना है, I personally do not use Papa Cambridge. There are multiple way better websites, so you can use any of those. Say, so in this question, yes, same day पे होता है, same time पे होता है. everything is same. So like the moment IGCSE students are giving paper, O level wale bhi usi waqt de rahe hote hain, same. So now you need to talk about what role of operating system is. What's the role of operating system to ensure that memory is efficiently managed. So the first point is that आपने तो ये बता देना that operating system makes sure that the memory is used efficiently. So we're going to be writing the operating system make sure that the memory is managed effectively. Memory is managed effectively. And why is this important? Because what if I tell you there is a big possibility that at one point maybe thousands of tasks might require the attention and stuff like that. So how are we going to ensure that a specific, just a minute, how will I say, so what if, like, for instance, one task might require 2 GB RAM, and then the other task might also require 3 GB RAM, and in reality you only have 4 GB total. So how is the operating system going to ensure that both of the tasks are effectively managed? It's going to provide the priority to the one which is more important, and maybe if it requires extra RAM, so it can take use of the virtual memory and stuff like that. So it's the operating system which basically makes sure that the memory is managed effectively. Saifullah, the points which you are talking about, those are not relevant to managing the memory. So yes, so we are only talking about managing memory. You're talking about other features and functions of the operating system. So we only need to talk about what is the role of operating system in managing the memory. So say, so एक point तो आपका ही हो गया. Now the second point is going to be that definitely if it is effectively managing the memory, this means that it is allocating and deallocates memory to processes. Then we can say that secondly, the operating system or the OS allocates and deallocates. ओहो गलत हो जाता है. Allocates and deallocates memory to process. Deallocates memory to process. So like what process should require how much RAM or how much memory and so on. It puts data in specific layer RAM or yeah. Bilkul. Mahat, that's correct. So then we are saying that just like Mahat said, we can also maybe write the third point as like it transmits the pages between RAM and virtual memory. It transmits the pages between RAM and virtual memory. Like for instance, I say that you have 4 GB RAM, but we are making use of a 5 GB software, a software which needs 5 GB of RAM. But we have 4 GB RAM. So how is it going to effectively manage the whole thing? It's going to make use of virtual memory. And so to make use of virtual memory, we are well aware that it is going to include the process of pages, that we need to transmit pages between your RAM and virtual memory, whatever table it is, immediately. So who's going to be managing that? It's going to be your operating system. Oh, no need to be sorry. आप अपने questions पूछते जाओ, even if it's wrong, कोई नहीं, that's good. सही है. Apart from that, we can also write other points, even though we're going to get 3 on 3 for this. We can say that your operating system creates virtual memory. So that's one valid point. You can also talk about maybe other features, like for instance, you can talk about how it creates a memory partition. So creates a memory partition. All of this, if you see, are very much related to VM. So it creates a memory partition, one other correct point. And maybe if you want to continue, you can also talk about how it moves data to and from memory, between memory and storage. So again, the same point as Mahat said, that it puts data in specific places like RAM and ROM. Perhaps you need to write it in a way the examiner demands. So you can say it moves data to and from the memory to like the storage, or like it makes sure that the processes do not try to access the same memory location and stuff like that. See? Tracking वगैरह, no, that's not something which managing memory does. Say, so now in part B, it says that a company brute force. Okay, this is now chapter number 5, so we will be skipping this. Is this clear? Memory management wali baat. How do you deallocate memory? Deallocation of memory basically means, what if I tell you that at one point you are playing this one game and this is your RAM, and in this RAM you have allocated like maybe 3 GB to playing, let's say, Fortnite. Okay, so you're playing Fortnite and 3 GB of the whole RAM is basically going to Fortnite. But now you turn off Fortnite and you open up a PDF viewer which is like maybe 5 MB. So if you turn off Fortnite, you're going to see that from your RAM, this is going to vanish. So how does it vanish? It basically means that it deallocates the memory, and it perhaps allocates the memory slot to some other task. So like in this scenario, it allocates it to maybe a file viewer, which you are using for studying purposes. समझ आई रहे हैं? So basically deallocation and allocation means that allocation means assigning some specific memory for a task, and deallocation means taking out some specific memory from the RAM which is not being used so that it can be allocated to some other task. And it also means that if you're deleting something from your whole actual SSD or hard disk, that also means that you're basically deallocating memory, which means removing it. See? So now we are done with this one question. We are perhaps done with all of this summer 2025 papers. And now we're going to be looking into the March 2025 paper. I hope it's available up here. Oh, yes, it is. So now let's look for questions related to chapter number 4. Now you might have seen that this chapter is something which an examiner does love to test again and again. So you should be very much prepared for questions related to memory management and all that stuff. This has a lot of chapter number 3 questions though. No, no. Chapter 6. Yep, let's go. We have a question up here. Question number 7. Now, there is no Feb March session in Pakistan. Feb March session is only offered in India throughout the world. So it's like only India's region paper, whatever you want to call it. Say. So now, question number 7 is again discussing the concepts of programming languages. So it says that programs can be written in a high-level language or a low-level language, just the way I told you guys earlier on. So now it says that machine code is one type of the low-level language. Machine code is basically something similar to binary. मिल जाता है. I've opened it up on like literally a random website. It's like Papa Cambridge, it has it. Then it says identify one other type of low-level language. Identify the translator that might be needed for the type of low-level language you have identified. So we have two types of low-level language. One is known as translator, not translator, one is known as machine code, and then the other one is basically known as assembly language. So this one is basically assembly language. And remember, assembly language translation is being done by another sort of software. So it's not compiler, it's not interpreter. It's basically, no, Mahadron. It's not interpreter. It's basically assembler. So the translator used to convert the assembly language into machine code is basically known as assembler. My bad. Assembler. Say, so ये आपको याद होना चाहिए because usually people do lose marks on making such mistake. Right, so let's continue to the second part, and it says that a high-level language can be translated into a low-level language using a compiler or an interpreter. Describe the advantages of using an interpreter instead of a compiler. 4 points, so we expect you to write 2 points, followed by 2 explanations as to why that thing is being done. Or you can also mention like 4 points, 4 separate points. So it's up to you, whatever you want to go with. So now we need to talk about advantages. So the first one can be like, the translator stops when an error is found. So we can also write the way in a way like I can say, firstly, the translator stops when an error is found. The moment an error is located, it stops, and it does not continue until or unless that specific error is being resolved. We'll go line by line. So the second point will be each statement is translated and executed before the next. Say, so each statement is executed line by line. कर देते हो, इस तरह कर लेते हैं, executed line by line. 2 points. Now we can continue with the third one, as in like we can say that it can test. No, perhaps we can say that okay. The translator stops and an error is found, and we can say that until or unless the user corrects it, it's not going to continue. So we can also call it as real-time debugging when and where an error is found. This allows real-time debugging of when and where the error is found. So like for instance, tell me one thing, you run a code and it tells you no, there is an error on line number 27. So this allows you with this basically helps you in a way that you know that the error has been located on line number 27. So it allows you real time, not real live, real time debugging, that you know, okay, while writing it, there's an error in line 27. So you correct it rather than completing a 1000 line code and then compiling it and it's going to give you a whole list. उस तरह बड़ा मसला हो जाता है. So this is one other valid point. Does efficient translation? No, that won't be a valid point. Lesser translator, or is it the same thing? Okay, translator is basically the broader term. Say it's a broader term, and beneath the translator you have interpreter, compiler, and assembler. So it's sort of, you have the translator, and then there are three types of translator. One is known as compiler, the second one is known as interpreter, and then the third one is basically known as assembler. Now your assembler is only used for assembly language, whereas these two can be used for high level languages. This is basically a short difference. Yes, Rayan, you have to expand on a point. Remember, it's usually advised that you can say you should write one point and then expand on it or explain it. That's how you get, like, usually when it says explain, so these keywords are pretty important. We don't have a keyword for explain up here, but if it was that explain, this meant that you need to follow this specific structure. But because it says describe, if you even if you mention 4 non-linked points, you're still going to get marks. So then apart from that, you can also say that basically because we can do like real-time debugging, it also means that we can test specific sections of the code. So like, what if I write one specific function and I want to test that? So I can test it on that moment. If it's fine, well and good. Agle ko kar diya, otherwise you're going to continue. So we can say that it can test sections of code. So it can test sections, a section of codes. Sections of code. Sections of code. And you're going to get a perfect 4 from this. So now the C part says that an IDE provides translators, and you need to just talk about 3 other common functions. So we mentioned it earlier on too. So you can say maybe like code editor, perhaps let's write newer ones. Code editor. So we can say it provides error diagnostics. So if like there is some sort of an error, it can tell you that their error is in line number 27 and stuff like that. Then you can also say like autocomplete, and also autocorrect. Now for such questions, I would advise that you all should memorize like 4 examples which you guys think are the easiest for you all, and then try to memorize it in a way that whenever a question comes up, you should be fully aware of it. So it's not like you need to memorize all 10 points, rather just go and memorize 4 of those points which you usually feel like are the easiest to understand. Say तो इस तरीके से आपको काफी अच्छे से सारी समझ आ जाएगी. With that, we are done with this paper too. So we did like 4 questions so far. 4 questions. We have 6 minutes, so let's see if we can do any other question. Let's look into summer 24 paper. If we can find one last question before ending the class. So yep. Question. Do you have any questions till now, or are we good to go? Let me find a question till then. Yep, we do have a question up here, and that's a pretty good short question. So we're going to do this. So how much is the duration? These online classes, it's going to be for like 1 hour. So we usually start at like around 9. So 9 to 10. Yep, 1 hour. But I got like 10 minutes late today, if I'm not wrong. Perhaps we started at 9:10, right? So still, it's going to end at like 10 in like 5-10 minutes. So now let's look into this one question. This is talking about application and system softwares. So it says that a student uses both system software and application software on their computer. And we need to give one example. So you can give any example of your choice. So you can mention operating system or any utility software you want to mention. So I should go like, I want to go with operating system. So you can write operating system, but it's up to you. Whatever utility software you want to mention, there is like a whole list in the book. You can go with any of them. So utility software. Okay, Apart from that part, we say that you need to give two examples of application software. So just like before, one was like you can talk about maybe video editor software, just say हमने पहले किया था, but you can also talk about like word processor, so like this Microsoft Word, but don't write Microsoft Word, that's the software name. It's not like the general name. The general name of those kind of softwares is like a word processor. And just like that, you can also talk about like maybe spreadsheet, database, web browser, email client, image photo editor, whatever, social media app. So let's go with like maybe web browser. That's an easy one. So web browser. And now the C part basically says you need to just basically highlight two differences between system software and application software. How do I know two differences? Because the number of marks are like two. So one difference can be like system software. It manages and maintains the hardware or software. So we can say that firstly, system softwares manages question है Google Sheet, Zoom, and WhatsApp. Yes, about like soft, you don't have to mention the name of the actual software. That can lead to copyright. Remember, you need to mention the type of the software, right? So it's not like Google Sheet. You need to mention spreadsheet. It's not like Zoom and WhatsApp. You need to talk about social media apps. Otherwise, you're going to be losing marks. So you should not write the company's name or a specific software name. That can lead to copyright. So up here in C part, it says that what are the difference. So the first one is that first is system software manages the hardware and software. Manages the hardware and software. You get 1 mark for this. And then you need to talk about the second point. Secondly, basically your application software, they allow the user to perform tasks. Secondly, application softwares allows the user to perform tasks, and this will get you a perfect one. Two. With that, manages. Oh yes, my bad. Thank you for that, Faizan. So I wrote manages twice. So say this manager, yep. And this will get you a perfect 2 on 2. So with that, we have done like 5 questions today, and I guess that is enough for today. I have to see what kind of task does the examiner expect from this. So like the task can be anything. So like if I say I want to edit a specific photo, that's a user task, right? So here I want to maybe write an essay. So I need to do a specific task of writing essay. So I will be looking for an application software like word processor. Maybe I want to use Instagram. So I might want to make use of a task related to opening a social media app. So these are the kind of tasks that basically by using the word task, it's generalizing it, because an application software can have ample amount of usages. So a word processor, spreadsheet, all of them are like possible applications. So हम सब तो लिख नहीं सकते, so it's usually something we write as general. So the general word for up here is that it allows the user to perform tasks. Is this clear? Many perform tasks for users in a computer. Yep. Type of correct. Yes. So for the application system, basically, it does not manage the performance task. It basically allows the user to perform tasks. That's a better word. Whereas system software, basically, it basically manages the computer hardware and software so that it can provide an interface for the user where they could perform tasks using application software. So अगर मैं आपको diagram बना के दूं, it's like you see, you have system softwares. These system softwares basically allows you to store application software. So without system software, application software will not run. And then a user basically makes use of application software. So it's the same way that your system software is basically your Windows, and then the application software is your Chrome browser, and then their Mars is. So I'm going to be making use of the Chrome browser, which might be stored on Windows or like maybe Mac OS in my scenario. So आपकी ये जो हो गए, this is basically your system software, Chrome is your application software, and then this is me. That is the whole mechanism. So you can say yes, that the system software basically coordinates between hardware and software so that it provides an platform for the user to install application softwares, and so that the application softwares are then eventually used to provide some sort of solution or maybe to perform a specific task. So like मैं Chrome use karo, or maybe I want to install some editing software. So whatever task I want to you make use of. So now you tell me, do I need a plain operating system? Like if I install OS on my laptop and I don't have anything on it, so what will I be doing? Nothing, right? I need to install these softwares. And what are those softwares? Those are like application software. So all the softwares you're using right now to do something, those are application software. And the main software which is basically required to run those application software, that is known as system software. So like your operating system. Perfect. Now, is it clear? Yes or no? Any other questions, or should we be done? Thank you so much. Thank you, man. All right. Seeing none, so answer two. Oh, yeah, yeah, sure. You know, sure. I can explain that. Let me end the recording and then we can do a quick ALU overview. All right, perfect. So we are done with today's class. This marks the end of today's class. Let me end the recording. Okay, take care, guys, everybody. Allah Hafiz. Bye bye. Inshallah, we might start chapter 5 tomorrow. Maybe we might do chapter 4. Let's see kya karte hain. But I guess we did enough questions of chapter number 4. So we might go with chapter 5 because I want to do a few questions related to pseudocode on Sunday. So, all right, all those who want to leave can leave. And if anybody wants to understand what ALU is, they can stay back. Now, coming to the question raised by the other students. So what's an ALU? So ALU basically is arithmetic logic, thematic logic unit. Logic unit. So in English, arithmetic basically refers to the functions like addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. Say, whereas logic refers to functions such as maybe if Ahmed and Maz do something, if Rayan or Faizan do something, and if I will do this thing, if XYZ does not do something, not, or maybe and or not, and other functions, jo ki logic gates, so we're going to skip that. See, now there is this one part within your CPU which has the capabilities of your brain. That is known as ALU. So if I say that I will send 500 rupees to you guys if Rayan and Saifullah both score greater than 90. Now, if there is a function, okay, no worries, let it be. Recording ho rahi hai to hone do. Yes, we do have a class tomorrow. Something. What did I say about something? I messed up. Never mind. So if I say that, let's say if Rayan and Saifullah both score greater than 90, and this something which I guess mentioned up here, those are basically other functions which are like XOR and NAND and all, but those are not usually tested in these scenarios. So इसलिए मैंने ignore कर दिए. वो आप आगे पढ़ोगे. But never mind. If I say that if Rayan and Saifullah both score greater than 90, I will be giving you guys 500 rupees. What part of your CPU has the brain to evaluate that this person is saying that you need to score greater than 90? And at the same time, there is this condition that two of the people are going to be doing this task. This basically reasoning is done by your ALU. So your ALU is that brain which basically makes use of arithmetic and logic operations. So like I will be doing this. So like if I say that if age is greater than 18, then maybe points के अंदर you can say points plus 1. So you increase your point by 1. So this basically is a function which your computer is going to evaluate in a way. Okay, if age is greater than 18, this is an logic part. It's making use of a specific logic. So it's making use of the logic. Okay, is it greater than 18? Yes or no? Okay, yes, it is. And then I'm saying, okay, you need to increase point by 1. So now this is arithmetic. So it's adding something into a variable. So this whole execution of such code where you have logic and where you have some sort of arithmetic, that is being done by your ALU. Now in exam you should be just aware of what an ALU stands for, and that it makes use of arithmetic logic, arithmetic and logic thinking. And arithmetic refers to maybe like adding stuff, and then logic refers to maybe having these and or not options. So like if age is greater than 18 and age is less than 22, or maybe if age is greater than 18 or age is greater than, let's say, 5, say. So all these functions come under logic. The recordings of these classes will be shared on our YouTube channel. I can send you the link. We do have other resources posted there too, so you can also look up there. And apart from that, if you're willing to join our official classes, those will be starting from the 1st of December, inshallah. So we will be having a 1 week free demo class, and you can join that if you just want to have a look at how we are going to be carrying out the whole course. So with that, who asked this question about ALU? It was Junaid. So Junaid, is this clear? Yes or no? Perfect, perfect, Junaid. That's great to know. All right. So, by the way, Mahad, if you're new, there is this Instagram channel page too. You can also follow that because we do post a lot of useful stuff out there too, and it's also a official platform where we share updates. And if you're not in our WhatsApp group, so you can find the link by just messaging us on our Instagram, and we're going to add you in it, inshallah. So, with that, I'm going to be ending today's class. Let me just stop the recording.